Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, a Navy SEAL murder trial continues. New witnesses take the stand saying they saw Eddie Gallagher shoot at civilians. A live report on today's testimony. Plus, the rules have changed when it comes to living in your car on San Diego streets. After a brief grace period, police are now enforcing the law. And a new investigation into a migrant center in Texas is causing public outcry. Why attorneys believe there are hundreds of children being treated inhumanely. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. It's Friday, June 21st. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. The first week of a Navy SEAL murder trial wraps up. Eddie Gallagher is accused of killing an ISIS prisoner while deployed in Iraq. Today, snipers testified they saw Gallagher shoot into crowds of civilians. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh is there now. Steve, what's the latest?
That's right, Ebony. This afternoon's testimony were all about Navy SEALs who were their fellow snipers. Let me set the scene for you. They were set up, this is Iraq in 2017, they were set up across the Tigris River, and their job was to shoot across the river at ISIS members who might be trying to get water. The job was to distinguish between the ISIS fighters and civilians. Dalton Tolbert said he had fired a couple of warning shots at an elderly man who was set up across the street. That elderly man then just ran away from him, trying to get into a building, and could not get in that building. And then he saw a red dot on his back, and that old man fell. Then Gallagher, he says that he testified that Gallagher said over the radio that you guys missed him, I got him. And then later, Special Operator Josh Verne said he saw a group of young women, and then one woman was hit in the stomach and was dragged away by other women, again, across the Tigris River in Iraq. Though the defense was quick to point out that neither one of these special operators actually saw Gallagher personally pull the trigger. Defense attorney Tim Parlatore said this has all been a conspiracy by young SEALs.
Nobody ever talked about a murder case. Nobody ever said Eddie Gallagher murdered a prisoner until months after they got back. And then the text messages that came out today bore that out. You know, this is a small group of SEALs that wanted to get rid of their chief, and they went through to try and find a way to do that.
And just to wrap up here, fallout from the bombshell testimony yesterday of Corey Scott. He said that he was the one who actually killed the wounded fighter. His immunity agreement seems fairly ironclad with military and federal prosecutors, and now we're hearing he might have a separate agreement with the military that would not allow him to be discharged. Reporting live from Naval Base San Diego, Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
Thanks, Steve. It's illegal in San Diego for people to live in their vehicles, but the ordinance wasn't being enforced until now. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman joins us live from Mission Bay with an update. Matt?
Yeah, Ebony, San Diego police tell me that they will now begin enforcing the law that says people cannot live in their RVs from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. anywhere in the city or at any time near homes or schools. SDPD says over the last month it's been educating its officers about the law. Now, people living near the beaches hopes this enforcement drives campers out of town, while people living in their vehicles say it's unfair.
This is an escape hatch for people who are living in these expensive apartments and want to get away from it. A lot of people are that way. They live two paychecks away from from the street, and one day they hit the street and they say, well, you know, I don't want to be on the street, so they get a motorhome.
Max Berry says he's been living out of his RV for the last couple of years.
This is an 81. It's an 81 Toyota.
He says he can't afford a place in San Diego.
I live on Social Security.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
Is it not enough to get an apartment here?
Oh, no, I couldn't get an apartment here, not on that.
Sperry says the high price of housing is what's causing people to live in their vehicles.
These people don't go to school when they're kids and talk to the other kids and say, I can't wait to grow up and become a homeless person. You know, they don't want that. What they lack is money.
Meantime, some people are welcoming enforcement of the new vehicle habitation law.
I'm all for it. I think, it's becoming a huge problem. The whole homeless issue is becoming a huge problem, and I'm all for it.
Doug Johnson works in Ocean Beach and says people living in vehicles are dumping trash all over town.
They definitely trash the place, and, I'm sure there's some good ones out there that are respectful of everyone's private property, but there's a lot more bad ones, it seems like.
The city has 3 safe parking lots where people can go to sleep overnight. People we talked to think the parking lots are a good idea.
There will be a place for these people, but it's definitely not on the streets or causing health problems for the environment and the other locals.
But Sperry in Mission Valley says the lots are too restrictive.
I think a lot of people just aren't going to go to it because these are people who are interested in freedom, and it's clear that this is not about freedom. I mean, you get locked into that thing between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. the next morning.
Now, San Diego police said that they're not going to be taking a hammer approach to enforcement. They're going to be practicing progressive enforcement, meaning they're going to be giving out warnings. Instead of just giving people tickets right away or arresting violators, they're going to be also letting them know where those safe parking lots are. An SDPD spokesman tells me, though, enforcement will be at an officer's discretion. Live here in Mission Bay, Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Thanks, Matt. The Department of Homeland Security continues to send migrants back to Mexico, but migrants have repeatedly said in court that they're not safe there. KPBS reporter Max Rivlin-Nadler explains.
4 days a week, Central American migrants are brought to this nondescript office building in downtown San Diego for hearings in their pending asylum applications under the program known as the Migrant Protection Protocols, or MPP. During their hearings, the vast majority of them express fear of returning to Mexico, the country they might have to wait inside of for 18 months or longer before finding out if they've been granted asylum. So far, 14,000 migrants nationwide have been returned to Mexico under MPP. Kenji Kazuka is a lawyer for the organization Human Rights First. He's spoken to asylum seekers returned to Juarez, Calexico, and Tijuana.
A major concern for people who have been returned is their immediate safety. So people are staying many times in very informal shelters, in migrant hostels. Some are sleeping on the streets, and they're concerned that they are likely to be kidnapped, to be extorted, to be robbed.
A Reuters report this week found that only 1% of migrants who expressed fear of returning to Mexico were allowed to stay in the United States after their court hearing. And Kazuka says that even though the Mexican government promised to provide work visas for migrants as they wait for their day in court, he has yet to meet or hear of anyone who has been given one. The MPP program is being challenged in court. Even so, the program will be expanded as part of a deal between the Mexican and U.S. governments. Mexico has said it expects up to 60,000 migrants to be returned over the course of this summer. Max Rivlin-Nadler, KPBS News.
U.S. detention facilities housing migrants continue to come under fire for inhumane conditions. A recent investigation into one in Texas is especially raising concerns. KPBS's Chris Underwood shows us what was uncovered.
A 2-year-old boy locked in detention wants to be held all the time. A few girls, ages 10 to 15, say they've been doing their best to feed and soothe the clingy toddler who was handed to them by a guard days ago. Lawyers warn that kids are taking care of kids, and there's inadequate food, water, and sanitation for the 250 infants, children, and teens at the Clint Border Patrol Station in Texas.
We really have a dire situation here, both because of the unsanitary conditions that these children are being kept in, the unhealthy facility that's being run there that's not made for children, and the number of children who are being kept there.
This bleak portrait emerged Thursday after a legal team interviewed 60 children at the facility near El Paso. It has become the latest place where attorneys say young migrants are describing neglect and mistreatment at the hands of the U.S. government. Law professor Warren Binford, who was helping interview the children, described her discovery.
This was not a facility that was even on our radar until last week when we found out that children recently have started to be sent there, and then we arrive and we find out that there are over 350 children there when we arrived.
Many children interviewed had arrived alone at the U.S.-Mexico border, but some had been separated from their parents or other adult caregivers, including aunts and uncles, the attorney said. Data obtained by the Associated Press show that on Wednesday, there were 3 infants in the station, all with their teen mothers, along with a 1-year-old, 2 2-year-olds, and a 3-year-old. There are dozens more under 12. 15 have the flu, and 10 more are quarantined.
We've seen the worst conditions that we've seen in the last 3 years of conducting these visits. That in the last week at Ursula and this week at the Clinton border facility, we are seeing sick children, we are seeing dirty children, we are seeing hungry children, we're seeing children who have been separated from their parents and other family members, children who within the facility are being separated from their siblings, which they need to be with their siblings right now. We are seeing dirty clothes on them. Many of them have not been bathed. Many of them talk about how hungry they are. These children have been falling asleep, some of them during the interviews with us. They have also talked about how dizzy they are, the headaches that they have.
The lawyers inspected the facilities because they are involved in the Flores settlement. It's a Clinton-era legal agreement that governs detention conditions for migrant children and families. The lawyers negotiated access to the facility with officials and say Border Patrol knew the dates of their visit 3 weeks in advance.
Our children are telling us that there have been over 300 children in a single room. If that's true, which it appears to be, then literally the United States is warehousing children in a Lord of the Flies scenario, and we've got to do something about it.
Since late last year, 5 migrant children have died while in the care of Customs and Border Protection. President Trump is talking about his recent meeting with San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulkner. It happened this week in Washington, D.C. The two spoke about some of San Diego's biggest issues, such as the Tijuana sewage flow, homelessness, and cross-border trade. But last night, President Trump went on Fox News and claimed Faulkner thanked him for the border wall. Take a listen.
We just finished San Diego, as you know, San Diego and California. They're so happy. The mayor was just up in my office, great guy, and he came up to thank me for having done the wall because it's made such a difference. He said it's like day and night. He said people are flowing across, and now nobody can come in.
Mayor Faulkner's office responded to Trump's comments, saying in part, "That's not what Mayor Faulkner said. We all know that the president uses his own terminology, but that wasn't the focus of their conversation." Legendary local drag queens are being honored throughout the summer at the San Diego History Center. And I got a sneak peek of the exhibition that opens tonight. We're here at the San Diego History Center where the performance art of drag is being celebrated. The exhibition is called The Legendary Drag Queens of San Diego, and we're here now with the curator and internationally recognized author, Dr. Lillian Faderman. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
This exhibition also commemorates the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots. Can you tell me, why was that such a pivotal moment in the LGBTQ movement?
The Stonewall riots were so important because it was the first time on a large scale involving a couple of thousand people that gay people, as we were all called in 1969, fought back and fought back for 4 nights, fought back in great anger because they had realized that gay people endured decades of persecution and discrimination, and it was time to make our upsetment felt. And so it became a pivotal moment. As one gay wit said, it was the hairpin drop heard round the world. The riots themselves ignited more organizing, such as the Gay Liberation Front, and then a year later, to commemorate the riots, the first pride parades. There were pride parades in New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco and Chicago, and they grew and grew. And now, of course, millions of people worldwide participate in these pride parades.
So how does the story of drag fit into the larger exhibit, which is entitled The LGBTQ San Diego Stories of Struggle and Triumphs?
In 1966, the San Diego City Council passed a law that prohibited cross-dressing in San Diego. And of course, a lot of people who did cross-dress, many people that we would call transgender now, were arrested as a result of that law. But despite that, a club opened here in 1968 called the Showbiz Supper Club. So there was a real distinction between cross-dressers on the street and cross-dressing as entertainment. Drag queens are they are fabulous entertainment, and the history goes back a long way, all the way to the 19th century when drag was a staple of vaudevilles, and drag performers were some of the highest paid performers in vaudeville. But in San Diego, the history of drag as entertainment goes back to 1968 with the Showbiz Supper Club. That went until 1982. In the 1990s, Lips opened and is still going as a venue of drag entertainment. And I want to emphasize that it really has become entertainment for crossover groups.
When you think about drag queens, one might think about the glamorous costumes or the glamorous hair and makeup, but the people who participate tell us that it's so much more than that. And here to tell us more about that is Queen Mother of the Americas, longtime Latino and LGBTQ activist, Nicole Murray Ramirez.
You have to remember in the 1960s and 70s, homosexuality was illegal. And it was in this environment, most people were in the closets. The only fundraising mechanism for GLBT civil rights movement and agencies like our Center and our Pride were drag shows. And which they continue to help fund. But in those days, it was just the drag shows that raised most of the money that laid the foundation for many of our organizations that exist today, especially during the AIDS epidemic.
And talk to me about how it feels from going from being illegal in something that was happening in nightclubs only to being celebrated in this way at a museum right here in Balboa Park.
Well, to be honest, I think that RuPaul's Drag Race has focused on the art of drag. What people don't realize that probably it's in our DNA. There isn't a drag queen that hasn't been on the RuPaul drag show or any of these drag queens that have not raised money and been featured at benefits at no cost. Drag queens have been raising money for decades for the GLBT community, but it's also important to note that also outside of the community, we've done things for the Jerry Lewis Telethon and Cancer Society and children's. We do toy drives and Easter egg hunt, and most of these are put on to this day by drag shows.
What else do you hope people walk away from this exhibit learning about the drag performance and community?
Well, I think that my hope with this exhibit will be an educational vehicle to people realize that the performers are not just entertainers. That's what I hope that they see, that there's not only a personality, but compassion and a commitment to making this world a better place.
I hope people will walk away from this legendary Drag Queens of San Diego exhibit or portion of our LGBTQ plus San Diego exhibit with the realization that these drag queens are fabulous, that they are not only wonderful entertainers, but also I hope they will come away with the realization that these drag queens have led very interesting lives and contributed to the San Diego community largely.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And if you want to get in on the action, it runs until September 8th at the San Diego History Center in Balboa Park.
Well, we've been talking about windy conditions here across the desert and mountain areas, and that continues for tonight, at least until 9 p.m., where you have that light purple. That's what we're talking about, wind advisory, and that includes Borrego Springs as well as Pine Valley. In the deserts, we've been noticing reduced visibility. That will continue through tonight. Winds will continue to ease as we move into your Saturday and continue into the extended forecast, but do be cautious, especially if you're driving a big truck or something in that along those lines. Those crosswinds will be very dangerous at least through the 9 o'clock hour. Here in San Diego, well, those winds are also impacting us, but they have been strengthening our marine layer. Low clouds as we have an onshore flow, and that continues tonight for San Diego with a low of 62. Also noticing the low clouds into Oceanside with a low of 61. If you're out to Borrego Springs, dropping down to 65 and 50 in Mount Laguna. And we move into your Saturday. It's a dry forecast, less wind, and a warmer trend even into the early week here. So that's going to be great news. You're looking at a high of 72 in Oceanside. Still going to be some morning clouds at the coast, so don't expect to start off with sunshine in Oceanside nor San Diego. We'll be topping off at 69 degrees in San Diego for Saturday, 101 in Borrego Springs, and 71 in Mount Laguna. Warm and dry across much of the southwest for the early week outlook as well, where our wet weather will be focused is further to the east across the Great Lakes and even extending into the portions of the southeast. But here at home, we're in our typical trend, highs in lower 70s at the coast for the next several days, and looking at low clouds through the morning with some sun in the afternoon. Inland areas also going to be looking at some low clouds for Saturday, Sunday into your Monday, but notice Monday a high of 80. So not feeling too bad out there. Summer light conditions, and we're looking at a high of 101 Saturday, Sunday, remaining in the triple digits Monday in the deserts. Once again, winds ease out here, so no hazy skies, no blowing dust, just heat and sunshine. Moving into the mountains, also noticing those winds easing. Going to feel a tad bit cool tomorrow with a high of 71, and then into the mid-70s for your Sunday and Monday with lots of sun. Reporting for KPBS News, I'm your meteorologist, Dajia Swad. Back to you.
After a lot of speculation and a call from President Trump to lower interest rates, this week, leaders of the central banking system of the U.S., the Federal Reserve, have kept interest rates unchanged. Still, economists predict rates will be lowered this year. We'll be talking about that and more for today's Friday Business Report with George Belch from SDSU's Fowler College of Business. What's motivating the Federal Reserve to hint at lowering interest rates?
Well, what we have going on right now, it's a little bit of a battle between the Federal Reserve and President Trump. What the Fed's doing, they raised interest rates 4 times last year. And the president was very irate about it because he argues there's no real reason to do so. Now what they're trying to do, they're saying, you know, let's get ahead of the game. The main concern is a recession. Lowering interest rates are a way to head off the recession. Consumer spending is about 70% of our GDP. And if we have lower interest rates, that's going to make it possible to stimulate the housing market, automotive purchases, a lot of big durable items. But I think really what's behind this is that the Fed is saying we want to be proactive. There is concern. We have global tensions going on in the world. We have the situation in the Middle East. We have the trade issues with China. Many experts, economists are predicting that we could see 2 or 3 rate cuts over the next year. So that clearly should have a major economic stimulus, particularly going into the 2020 election year.
Next up, cryptocurrency. What is it? Is it real money? How does it work? This week, Facebook announced Project Libra, which is a plan to bring digital money to millions of people. Now, this digital currency will be called Libra, and it's not going to be available for months. But, George, what do we know about it, how it will work?
Well, cryptocurrency is basically a digital currency, but it's not just like a payment system. A lot of people think it's the same as a PayPal or Venmo. That's really not what it is. It's backed by cryptographic protocols. It is not regulated by the government. There's no central authority that controls cryptocurrencies. But in a sense, it becomes a recognized currency that people actually begin to use. But Facebook really has a much broader goal here. They want to bring this to the world. There are more than 2 billion people who use Facebook around the world, and they have a very difficult time doing financial transactions. They have to pay large fees sometimes to do it. So Facebook at least is stating that their goal is to bring this cryptocurrency to about 2 billion people. With the financial backing, it may work.
And finally, there is a bill working its way through the California Senate that would limit short-term vacation rentals like the ones provided by Airbnb in coastal communities. If passed, what could this mean, George, for the short-term rental industry?
Well, this would have a major, major impact on the short-term rental industry, because basically what it's going to say is all these coastal communities in San Diego, Pacific Beach, Mission Beach, Del Mar, all of them basically can't do short-term rentals anymore. Some of them, like Del Mar, already have their own legislation. But, for example, the city of San Diego does not. Other coastal communities have just looser regulations. And what this is about is saying that the investors have pretty much taken over the properties in the coastal communities. Instead of making them available to year-round renters, they are just taking the profits from doing short-term rentals, which are much more lucrative. So what this is designed to do is to try to put an end to that, and ultimately the backer of the bill, an assembly person from Encinitas here in San Diego, is saying we're going to use this as kind of a test market. This only is for San Diego, the coastal cities in San Diego right now. The original goal was to look at it over 5 years. Now they've rolled that back to 3 years, and they're saying in 3 years we're going to go examine this and see if it's had an impact in helping make rentals more accessible and maybe even the housing shortage.
Well, we'll stop on that note, and we will definitely be monitoring that one as well. And that wraps it up for our Friday Business Report. George Belch, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.